The citadel of Queen Elaran stretched high above the valley, its spires slicing into the clouds like frozen silver daggers. Shadows clung to every corner of the palace, moving as if they had minds of their own. Marble corridors echoed with footsteps that were never entirely empty. It was a place of power, mystery, and quiet danger, where secrets whispered to those who dared to listen. Eric moved carefully among the towering bookshelves of the palace library. The air was heavy with the scent of old parchment and dust, and the light of flickering torches painted the room in gold and shadow. Few ever entered this chamber. It was meant for scholars and scribes of the royal court, yet Eric found himself drawn here more often than anyone could know. He was not a man of wealth or influence. His robes were plain, his hands roughened from work with ink and scrolls. Yet, despite his lowly position, Eric had a mind sharp enough to catch the subtle shifts of power in the court. He had learned to see the world as it truly was, not merely as appearances suggested. And today, curiosity had led him to a corner of the library he had never dared explore before. A small door, hidden behind a row of shelves, creaked softly as Eric pushed it open. Inside was a narrow passage lined with scrolls and tomes bound in leather so old it seemed to breathe with memory. At the end of the passage sat a single chest, locked but worn. Eric's heart beat faster. He could feel that this was no ordinary chest. It hummed with an energy he could not name. He knelt before it, brushing away layers of dust, and found a hidden latch beneath the lock. With trembling hands, he opened it, revealing a single leather-bound journal. The cover was plain, yet it seemed to glow faintly in the torchlight as if it contained something alive. Eric hesitated. To read a queen's private journal was forbidden. The punishment alone could destroy him, and yet something stronger than fear compelled him to open it. The first page was written in a fine, elegant hand, fluid and precise. The ink, though slightly faded, bore words that were alive with thought and emotion. "I have watched him for many months now," the journal began. "He does not know, and perhaps he never will. There is a light within him, quiet but unyielding, and yet there is fear in the corners of his mind. I cannot tell whether it is courage or the spark of destiny, perhaps both." His name had never been written, yet he knew it was he who occupied every careful observation. His pulse quickened, and a chill ran down his spine. The next pages were more revealing, more intimate than he could have imagined. The queen wrote of small acts he had thought unnoticed, the way he straightened a fallen scroll, the subtle kindnesses he offered to servants, his quiet moments of reflection. Each sentence held admiration, but also something darker, an obsession that unsettled him. "I feel my heart both drawn to him and wary of him," one entry read. "His presence is a challenge to all I have known, yet I cannot turn away. If I am honest, I have never wished for another in such a way, nor feared one so deeply." And yet another part recoiled. The words carried power, a subtle dominance that reminded him how small he was in her world. As he read, he discovered not just admiration, but secrets of the palace itself, hints of a curse woven into the royal lineage, a shadow that lingered over the throne. The writing spoke of burdens Eric had never seen, of decisions made in loneliness and fear, and of a heart trapped behind golden gates. "I am bound to the throne, bound by duty and the weight of shadows that whisper in the halls at night," one entry confessed. "If I am ever to trust, it must be with a soul willing to bear both my power and my pain." Could he be that soul? The queen was not only observing him, she was testing him, thinking of him as more than a mere scholar. And yet the words carried danger. They spoke of a balance delicate as glass, easily shattered. One wrong move and he could fall from her favor, or worse. Hours passed without his noticing. The candlelight waned, casting longer shadows across the pages. Eric read on, unable to stop, drawn into a private world of vulnerability and longing he had never imagined a queen could possess. The words were a confession, a map into the heart of someone who ruled a kingdom yet had never felt free. The last entry chilled him to his core. It was recent, written just days ago. "If he understands me, he may survive. If he does not, all will crumble. The shadows do not forgive the blind." She had seen him, studied him, and perhaps in some way claimed him without his consent. Fear and fascination warred within him. He knew the moment he returned the journal to the chest, a choice had been made. To act or to remain hidden could change everything. And yet a whisper of something daring, something defiant, rose in his chest. That evening, as the moon rose over the citadel, Eric wandered the corridors, the journal hidden beneath his cloak. The palace seemed alive with quiet power, shadows stretching and twisting as if to watch him. Every corridor, every archway felt charged with anticipation. It was as if the building itself knew he carried a secret, and that secret had power. Eric's thoughts returned again and again to the words in the journal. He imagined Queen Elaran walking among the golden halls, her presence a storm of authority and grace. How many times had she observed him without his knowledge? How many nights had she written of him, studying his fears and virtues alike? He wondered what she might say if confronted, not with rebellion, not with challenge, but with understanding. Could they speak as equals, or would the gap between queen and scholar remain insurmountable? The questions swirled in his mind like fog. The next day in the courtyard, Eric kept his eyes low, hands steady, yet every glance felt like it carried the weight of the journal's revelations. He sensed a change in the air, a subtle shift in how servants and courtiers looked at him. Was it imagination, or did the queen herself watch from a distant balcony, knowing he had read her thoughts? The palace was never quiet, yet in that subtle tension, Eric felt the first stirrings of something he could not name. Fear, yes, but also anticipation. The thought that he was somehow entwined with the queen's destiny, that his life might be part of her intricate design, was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. Even as he tried to continue his work, writing and cataloging scrolls as he always had, his mind returned again and again to the journal. He remembered the line that had chilled him most of all. The moonlight painted silver across the fountains and statues, turning them into ghostly shapes that seemed almost alive. He paused beneath a marble arch and felt the night press close around him. For the first time, he sensed the queen's presence, not in body, but in thought, as if the journal had become a bridge between them. A soft rustle of leaves made him start. He turned, half expecting the shadow of a guard, or perhaps the queen herself. But there was nothing, only the wind whispering across the marble and through the roses. Yet the feeling remained, he was not alone. He had stepped into a world of observation, power, and intimacy that few could ever glimpse, and Queen Elaran knew it. The first part of the story ended in the quietest moment, with Eric standing beneath the silver light, a scholar caught in the gaze of a queen whose heart was both dangerous and lonely. He realized that reading the journal had changed him. Nothing would ever be the same. And in the stillness, as the shadows of the palace moved like living things, Eric knew one truth above all. The queen would come for him. Whether it would bring peril or something unimaginable, he could not yet say. But one thing was certain. The game of shadows had begun, and he was no longer merely an observer. The moon had barely risen when Eric found himself summoned to the grand hall of the citadel. Its vast marble floor reflected the soft glow of hundreds of candles, while tapestries depicting centuries of royal victories hung in solemn silence on the walls. The hall was quiet, yet it seemed alive with whispers of the past. Every step he took echoed like a drumbeat in the hushed room, making him painfully aware of his own insignificance. He knew why he had been called, though fear coiled tight around his chest. The journal. It had been discovered, read in secret, and now the queen knew. He was no longer a mere scholar. He was a participant in a delicate, dangerous game, and the first move had been laid before him. From the shadows at the far end of the hall, a figure emerged, Queen Elaran. She moved with the grace of one who commands both fear and admiration, her robes flowing like liquid night around her. Her eyes, sharp and luminous, studied him as though they could peel away his very thoughts. Eric's heart hammered, and he bowed low, instinctively aware that any misstep could be fatal. "You've read my journal," she said, her voice calm but carrying an undercurrent that made the air vibrate. "You know things you were not meant to know." I meant no disrespect. But cleverness alone will not keep you alive in this place." Every word she had written in the journal now seemed to radiate from her, as though she had poured not ink but essence into those pages. She stopped in front of him and studied his face. "I have observed you for many months, as you know. You move through my halls with quiet skill, yet you do not see all. Tell me, scholar, do you understand what it is to carry power you cannot yet wield? I try to see what is hidden, and I try to understand. There are lessons even the journal cannot teach. You must experience the court itself." The queen's presence was magnetic, pulling at him in ways he did not understand. Every movement, every glance held layers of meaning he could not yet decode. Elaran stopped near a marble fountain, its waters glowing silver under the moon. "Tell me," she said, her voice softer now, "what do you feel when you walk these halls?" "I feel watched, Your Majesty, and yet I feel part of something greater, something I cannot name. The world of this palace and the fate of my kingdom touches you now." "What do you mean, Your Majesty?" The words confirmed what he had glimpsed in the journal. There was something more to Elaran's world than power or politics. There was danger, there was darkness, and yet beneath that darkness there was a longing she could not hide. "Do you trust me, Arik?" she asked suddenly, the question breaking through the silence like a blade. He hesitated. Trust was a dangerous thing in the palace, especially with a queen whose words could shape destiny. I want to, your majesty," he admitted. She nodded slowly, as if she had expected that answer. "Good, that will be tested soon enough, but tonight is for understanding. Follow me." Shadows can deceive, but they also reveal truth if one knows how to read them. "You are not as simple as you seem," Elaran said, breaking his thoughts. "Many would cower or flee. You linger, you seek understanding." She studied him for a long moment, then reached out a hand and touched his shoulder lightly. The contact was brief, but it sent a shiver through him, a mixture of fear and something unfamiliar, something warm and insistent. "The journal was only the beginning," she said. "You have seen my thoughts, yes, but thoughts are fragile. Actions reveal the heart. And soon, Arik, you will need to show me yours. You will learn that vigilance is as necessary as courage. Tomorrow, your education begins. Tonight, remember what you have seen. Remember that the queen does not reveal herself lightly. And remember this, the shadows are patient. They wait for those who falter." And he had accepted it willingly, recklessly, without knowing what awaited him. As he returned to his chambers later that night, the moon casting silver light across the stone floors, he could not stop thinking of the queen. He imagined her walking among the shadows, the weight of her crown a burden few could bear. He thought of the journal, of her words, of the intimacy and the danger they carried. And as he drifted into a restless sleep, one thought haunted him more than any other. The queen knew him, truly knew him, and now he was bound to her world in ways he could not yet understand. The shadows of the citadel stretched long and silent over the sleeping city, as if whispering a warning. The game had begun, and neither the scholar nor the queen would emerge unchanged. The citadel was quiet in the early hours, the halls empty except for the whisper of Arik's footsteps. The journal had changed everything. It had shown him that Queen Elaran was not just a ruler cloaked in authority. She was a woman weighed down by secrets, power, and a shadow that stretched across generations. Yet it was only now, as he followed her toward the abandoned cathedral at the edge of the kingdom, that he began to understand the true depth of her burden. The cathedral, crumbling with age yet strangely majestic under the moonlight, stood at the end of a winding path lined with gnarled trees. Arik's breath formed small clouds in the cold night air, and he shivered not from the chill, but from anticipation. He had been summoned for a purpose he did not yet know. Queen Elaran moved ahead of him, her presence a storm of power contained in a calm, graceful form. Her cloak trailed behind her, brushing the fallen leaves with soft whispers. The moonlight glinted in her eyes, revealing a flicker of something vulnerable beneath the usual icy command. Arik's chest tightened. He felt the same strange pull he had felt when reading her journal, a mixture of fear, awe, and something deeper he could not name. When they reached the cathedral, Elaran paused at the entrance, running her fingers along the cracked stone. "This place has always been forbidden," she said softly, almost to herself. "Few have dared to enter. And fewer still understand its meaning." Moonlight poured through the broken, stained glass, painting the floor in colors that had faded long ago. Dust swirled in the air, and the faint echo of water dripping somewhere in the distance made the cathedral feel alive, as though it had been waiting for them. Elaran led him to the center of the nave, where a dark circle had been etched into the stone floor. Strange symbols, worn but unmistakable, glowed faintly, reflecting the eerie silver light. Arik felt an instinctive shiver as he realized that this was no ordinary magic. This was ancient, powerful, and dangerous. "The curse," Elaran said quietly, her voice echoing slightly, "is older than the citadel, older than the throne itself. It binds my bloodline. Every queen before me has carried it, and every queen has struggled with it. It whispers in the walls, it watches through the halls, and it tests every heart that dares to love me or trust me. But what does it do?" He remembered the journal, the intimate words she had written about him. Suddenly, everything made sense. Her attention, her observation, even the way she had tested him, they were not merely whims of a powerful queen, they were preparation. "And you," Elaran continued, stepping closer, "you are now a part of this. You have seen what others cannot. You have read my thoughts, glimpsed my fears. The curse will test you as well, whether you know it or not. You must be strong, Arik. You must understand both me and yourself." Elaran raised her hand, and the symbols on the floor began to glow brighter. Shadows rose from the corners of the cathedral, moving independently, coiling like living threads. Eric felt a strange weight in his chest, as if unseen eyes were examining him, searching for weakness. "This is the shadow," Elaran said, her voice steady despite the movement around them. "It is part of the curse, a fragment of the magic that binds my bloodline. It feeds on fear, on doubt, on betrayal. But it also tests courage, loyalty, and understanding. Only those who are willing to face it without flinching may survive." The same pull he had felt in the journal, the magnetic force of the Queen's presence, anchored him. He could not move. "You must face it," Elaran said. "Not because it will harm you, though it can, but because only by facing the shadow can you prove your strength. If you falter, it will consume more than just you." The shadows twisted around him, cold and formless, yet he sensed a dark intelligence within them. They whispered doubts, fears, the echoes of every insecurity he had ever held. They showed him visions of failure, the kingdom in ruin, the queen lost to despair, his own life ending in the darkness. And yet, as he stared into the shadows, he felt something else, a clarity, a spark of courage he had never known. He thought of the queen, of her strength and her vulnerability, of the words she had written in the journal. He realized that he was not merely standing in the cathedral, he was standing with her, tethered to her fate. "I understand," he said finally, his voice firm despite the cold that seeped into his bones. "I will not falter." Eric felt the pressure around him ease, though the energy in the room remained potent, alive with ancient magic. "You have done well," Elaran said, stepping closer. Her hand hovered near his shoulder, not touching, yet the energy between them felt like a current. "Few can face the curse without fear consuming them. Fewer still do so with their heart open. You have shown me that you may endure more than I expected." There was a connection now, fragile yet unbreakable, forged in the crucible of shared danger and understanding. Suddenly, the shadows surged again, more forceful this time, and Eric felt their cold touch like a warning. He knew they had not yet finished testing him. The Queen's hand reached out, brushing briefly against his arm. The contact was fleeting, but it gave him strength. "You are ready," she said, "but the curse is patient. It will return. And you will need to be vigilant. Trust, courage, and understanding are your weapons. Do not let fear guide you, or it will destroy all you hold dear." The cathedral seemed to hum with quiet power as the shadows receded, leaving only the soft glow of moonlight and the echo of their whispered challenges. As they left the cathedral, the first light of dawn began to paint the horizon in shades of gold and pink. Eric felt both exhausted and exhilarated. He had faced the curse, glimpsed the Queen's true burdens, and understood for the first time the depth of the world he had stepped into. Yet, even as the sun rose, he knew this was only the beginning. The curse would return, the shadows would grow bolder, and the trials would become more dangerous. And through it all, he would remain tethered to Elaran, drawn to her power, her mystery, and the fragile humanity beneath her regal exterior. That evening, as he returned to his chambers, Eric thought of the journal, of the cathedral, and of the Queen. He realized that nothing in his life would ever be the same. He had entered a world of shadows, secrets, and power, and he had survived the first test. But he also understood that survival alone was not enough. He would need courage, understanding, and perhaps a heart willing to embrace what most feared. The first rays of sunlight streamed through his window, casting long shadows across the floor. And in those shadows, Eric sensed the echo of the Queen's presence, a reminder that the game of trust, power, and fate had only just begun. As he drifted into a restless sleep, he felt the shadow stir once more, not here, not in the cathedral, but somewhere beyond, waiting for fear, for doubt, for weakness. And he knew with a quiet certainty that the next trial would come soon, and it would test not only his strength but the bond he shared with the Queen. The morning sun crept over the citadel, spilling gold across the battlements and illuminating the intricate tapestries that lined the great hall. For Eric, the light offered little comfort. The events of the night at the cathedral had left him restless, his thoughts tangled in shadows of both awe and fear. He knew now that Queen Elaran's world was not just dangerous. It was a storm of politics, power, and ancient magic, and he had stepped directly into its eye. The court was already awake and buzzing with whispers. Courtiers in rich silks and stiff collars exchanged glances as Eric passed. Some eyes lingered too long, curious about the scholar who had gained the Queen's attention. Others were sharper, laced with suspicion. He felt the weight of their gaze, the subtle threat in their quiet words. Here, every smile hid a dagger, and every bow was a test of allegiance. Queen Elaran entered the hall with her usual command. Her presence was magnetic, every step measured and deliberate, every glance a silent declaration of power. Yet Eric noticed something different in her demeanor today, a tension that had not been there before. The weight of the curse, the shadows, and the whispers of dissent in the court pressed upon her shoulders more heavily than usual. "Eric," she said softly as she approached him, her eyes scanning the room. "There are forces at work in this court that will seek to test your loyalty, your judgment, and your courage. You must be vigilant. The shadows are patient, but those who act with certainty can survive." "I will do my best, Your Majesty," he said. "I will not falter. But remember, the true test is not in battle or words, but in the heart." He saw how every gesture, every word carried weight, how alliances could shift in a glance, and how a well-timed silence could hold more power than the sharpest sword. As the sun dipped low, the shadows of the hall grew long, stretching across marble floors and gilded walls. Elaran led Eric to a balcony overlooking the valley. The wind swept through their hair, carrying the scent of distant forests and the faint promise of rain. "Do you see, Eric?" she asked, her voice soft. "This kingdom is fragile, held together by trust that is easily broken. Many would see you as a pawn, and many already do. But there are those who see beyond rank and title, those who understand the strength it takes to act with integrity. I want to protect what you hold dear." Courtiers shouted, guards rushed, and a figure clad in dark armor stormed through the gates. Eric's heart raced as he recognized the emblem of a rival faction, nobles seeking to exploit the queen's vulnerabilities for their own gain. Elaran's face hardened, her posture commanding. "The traitors have come," she said. "Stay close to me, Eric. Observe, learn, and be ready. You may be called upon sooner than you expect." He realized that every decision, every gesture could tip the balance of loyalty in the court. At one point, a servant rushed to deliver a message, his hands trembling. Eric caught a glimpse of the seal, an old insignia known for secret plots and whispered treachery. Elaran read the note quickly, her eyes narrowing. "They plan to strike at the heart of the citadel tonight," she said quietly, her voice low enough that only Eric could hear. "We must act carefully. Every ally counts, and every enemy hides behind a mask of loyalty." She had chosen to share her trust with him, to include him in her world of shadows and power, and that trust was both a gift and a responsibility. As night fell, the citadel transformed into a labyrinth of anticipation and quiet danger. Torches burned brighter, guards moved with sharper precision, and whispers of the approaching threat floated through the corridors. Eric stayed near Elaran, observing not only her decisions, but the subtle ways in which she commanded respect and loyalty. "You must understand," Elaran said as they prepared for the night, "that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Tonight you will see this firsthand." He realized that his understanding of both magic and strategy would be tested in ways he could not yet predict. Elaran moved through the hallways like a force of nature, her presence a shield around those she protected. Eric followed, anticipating her needs, offering counsel, and when necessary, stepping into the path of danger. He felt the pull of the Queen's gaze constantly, a silent reminder that he was more than a participant. He was a partner, though not yet fully recognized. In a secluded chamber, Elaran confronted one of the infiltrators, a noble who had long harbored ambitions to control the throne. The man's arrogance faltered when he met her eyes. The air between them was electric with unspoken power. Eric watched from the doorway, realizing that the true battle was not in swords or shields, but in willpower, presence, and the ability to command fear without cruelty. "You underestimate me," Elaran said quietly, her voice carrying an authority that seemed to bend the very air around her. "The shadows in this kingdom belong to no one but me, and those who challenge me will find themselves undone." When the night finally drew to a close, the court had been secured, the traitors dispersed, and the citadel restored to its quiet vigilance. Eric and Elaran stood on the balcony once more, the stars above shimmering in silent witness to the trials of the day. "You have done well," Elaran said softly, her hand resting briefly on the stone railing. "You have observed, learned, and acted with courage. But know this is only the beginning. The true tests will challenge not only your skill but your heart, and in those trials, trust may be the hardest thing to maintain." He realized that the bond between them had grown stronger, forged in the crucible of danger and shared responsibility. "Your Majesty," he said, voice steady, I will do my best. I will not fail you." And that is why I trust you, more than I have trusted anyone in a long time. Yet even as he returned to his chambers, he could not shake the sense that something lingered in the shadows, waiting. The rival faction might have been repelled tonight, but danger was never truly gone, and the Queen's curse, ancient and patient, would continue to test both of them. Eric lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking of Elaran and the delicate balance of power and trust that now bound them. He realized that his life had changed irrevocably. He was no longer merely a scholar. He was a participant in a game of shadows, of loyalty, of hearts and destiny. And the next move, whether by friend or foe, would shape not only his future but the Queen's, and perhaps the fate of the entire kingdom. Outside, the citadel slept under a blanket of stars, silent and watchful. And in the deepest shadows, a whisper stirred. The game was far from over, and the bonds of trust, courage, and love would soon be tested in ways neither the scholar nor the Queen could yet imagine. The night hung heavy over the citadel, a blanket of darkness pierced only by the cold light of the moon. Eric moved swiftly through the empty corridors, his heart pounding with anticipation. Tonight would be unlike any night he had faced before. The Queen had been taken, not by chance, but by forces seeking to exploit the power that flowed through her bloodline. The whispers of the curse, ancient and patient, had grown louder, and Eric knew that only courage, loyalty, and understanding could see him through. He paused before the entrance to the hidden passage that led to the realm where the curse's essence lingered, a place that existed between reality and shadow. The cathedral where he had first faced the shadows seemed to pulse in his memory, a reminder of the trials that had already tested him. He drew a deep breath, steadying his mind. The Queen's life, and perhaps the fate of the kingdom itself, rested on his ability to act without hesitation. As he stepped into the passage, the air shifted. Shadows swirled around him, cold and alive, whispering doubts and fears he had fought before. The deeper he moved, the more the shadows coalesced into forms, faces, figures, fragments of memories, and illusions designed to test him. He saw visions of failure, the Queen lost, the palace in flames, the kingdom crumbling under betrayal. Every step forward demanded more than courage, it demanded a heart unbroken by fear. And yet, as the shadows pressed in, he felt a presence beside him, Queen Elaran. She had managed to escape the initial threat, guided by her own strength and knowledge of the curse, yet even she was changed. Her eyes glimmered with both determination and vulnerability, and Eric felt the pull of their bond stronger than ever. Together, they moved deeper into the shifting realm, their hands brushing occasionally, a silent promise of support and trust. "This place," Elaran said softly, her voice steady despite the cold that seeped into the shadows, "is where the curse is strongest. It feeds on doubt and fear. We must confront it together, or it will consume us both." Eric could feel the energy of the curse pressing against his very bones, threatening to sap his resolve. Yet he focused on Elaran, on the trust and bond that had grown between them through months of trials. The thought gave him strength. A figure emerged from the darkness, a manifestation of the curse itself. It was a monstrous shape, neither entirely human nor fully shadow, with eyes that reflected centuries of sorrow and rage. Its voice echoed in their minds, a thousand whispers layered into one. "We are not alone," she said firmly. "You feed on fear, but we carry courage. You feed on doubt, but we carry trust. You feed on despair, but we carry hope. And together we are stronger than you." He focused on Elaran, on her hand in his, and on the quiet determination that had first drawn him to her in the palace gardens. With a deep breath, he stepped forward and spoke clearly with all the strength he could muster. "You do not control us. You do not define our courage, our loyalty, or our hearts. We stand together, and you will not break us." Eric felt a warmth spreading through him, a light that seemed to rise from the core of his being. The shadow shrieked, twisting violently, but it could not withstand the combined strength of their resolve. Elaran stepped closer, her hand gripping his firmly, and together they focused all their energy, all their courage, all their hearts on one singular truth. They would survive, and they would protect each other. Slowly, the monstrous shape began to unravel, fragments of shadow dissolving into harmless mist. The whispers faded, leaving only the quiet hum of the realm and the soft echo of their shared heartbeat. The curse's power had been challenged, and it had faltered. Elaran exhaled, her shoulders sagging with relief, yet her eyes remained bright, filled with emotion. "You have done it," she whispered, almost in disbelief. We have changed it. The curse is no longer a chain to bind us. It is a bond we can carry together, one of understanding and strength." You understand now what it means to carry both fear and hope, to face darkness without losing yourself. You are no longer merely the scholar who stumbled into my world. You are my equal in strength and spirit." They stepped out of the realm together, the moonlight of the citadel welcoming them back to reality. The night air felt lighter, freer, as though the very stones of the palace had sighed in relief. Eric glanced at Elaran, realizing fully that the queen he had feared, admired, and grown to care for was now intertwined with him in ways neither could ever undo. Back in the throne room, the court had gathered. The rival faction had been dispersed, their plans foiled by Elaran's guidance and Eric's vigilance. The kingdom, though still fragile, was secure for the moment. Yet the trials they had faced together had altered something fundamental. Between the queen and her scholar, a bond had formed, tempered in shadow and strengthened by courage. Elaran turned to Eric, her expression unreadable for a heartbeat before it softened. "The shadows may always linger," she said quietly, "but now we have learned to face them together. And perhaps one day the world will recognize not just the power of a queen, but the strength that comes from trust, loyalty, and the courage to love without fear." Their journey had tested him, reshaped him, and shown him a depth of courage and love he had never known. "Your Majesty," he said softly, his voice carrying all the sincerity he could muster, I will stand by you always. Through shadow, curse, or danger, I will not falter." Together, they stood on the balcony of the citadel, the first light of dawn spilling over the horizon. The kingdom below stirred to life, unaware of the trials that had taken place in the quiet of night, unaware of the courage, trust, and bond that had been forged in shadows. The queen and her scholar watched the sun rise, knowing that while the world would always hold danger, uncertainty, and shadows, they had emerged transformed. The curse, once a source of fear and power, had become a symbol of resilience, understanding, and shared strength. And as the first birds of morning took flight, Eric realized something profound. The bond between him and Queen Elaran was no longer defined by titles, fear, or duty. It was defined by trust, courage, and the quiet, unspoken understanding that they had faced the darkness together and survived. In the days that followed, the citadel returned to its rhythm, the kingdom to its people. But the queen and her scholar knew that the shadows would always be near, watching, testing, waiting. Yet now they faced them not with fear, but with the certainty of their bond, the knowledge that together they were stronger than any darkness that might rise. And somewhere in the quiet corners of the palace, the faintest whisper of the curse remained, not as a threat, but as a reminder. The shadows always linger, but the heart, when steadfast and brave, can outshine even the darkest night.